very honored to be here and have this conversation. I'm also honored to be joined by these three amazing professionals. We're gonna talk through some things about being a design student and then a career in design. And so I'm gonna ask each of my panelists to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll jump right into the conversation. Sofia, why don't you start us off?
So my name's Sofia Acosta. I work for Gensler, Houston, and I graduated in 2021 with my master's, so I'm more recent to the job field.
Brand new to the job
Yes.
field. Yeah.
That makes me feel awkward saying what year I graduated. My name is Mike Johnson II. I am the Director of Interiors at Hickok Cole in Washington, D.C. I graduated from Howard University in 2002. Yeah.
You didn't have to give the year.
I'm not giving the year. So, Tonya Spry, I'm the Director of Human Resources at Gresham Smith, and graduated from MTSU and have been in HR, we'll just say around 25 years and leave it at that.
You and I have about the same work history, Tonya, I think. And so let's kind of jump right in and talk about, for Sofia and Mike, you're at different stages in your career right now. Sofia at the beginning, I think, Mike, fair to say, you're a mid-career professional, a leader, a practice leader in interiors for your firm. Can you talk a little bit about what got you to your career in design?
Yeah, I can go ahead and start. As far as picking design as a major and eventually a graduate major, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I took a college aptitude test that told me I should be an architect, and I thought it was lying because I'd never met someone who had done architecture. And then I took 3 more, and they all said architecture. So then my parents basically just told me, well, it totally makes sense. I grew up in the arts with my mom was very involved in the arts, and I grew up in a dance school, and my dad was a software engineer and very math oriented, and if you combine the two you get architecture. So it made a lot of sense why I was landing there. And so I did basically a program in high school where I shadowed an interior architect for a few months and loved what they did. I thought it was so cool to work in an office, but then do so many things that is still involved with people and getting to be a people person and designing and using all those different facets of the industry. And then when I went to college at K-State, you get to choose from 5 different disciplines. And so interior architecture and product design was the field I went into, because it's everything from a pen to a building. You know, that the idea that you could design anything that you look at or touch or sit in was so cool.
So those aptitude tests were right.
Yeah, they were very accurate.
Okay. Right. And Mike, so you grew up in Washington, D.C.
Born and raised.
Yep.
Never took an aptitude test. I was very, very big into comic books. So I was always constantly drawing any and everything that I possibly could. Started off with Ninja Turtles, and it just kept growing from there. And my mom was really supportive of me being an artist, but she needed me to go to college. Mm-hmm. So there was a youth program at Washington, D.C. where you worked on this during the summer, and I worked at Howard University, and I really didn't work. I just played around half of the time, but they introduced you to architecture, and it became exciting to me to solve this problem through design, through art, through a creative way of thinking, and that's how I started to kind of carve out my pathway to interior design.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks. So for neither one of you, at the age of 3, we hear a lot about people who know exactly what they want to do other than being a fireman. But neither one of you at an early age really knew that path. It connected for you later on. So Tonya, in human resources for a large firm, you clearly know what it takes to be noticed. you're hiring, you look at resumes. What are some important things that students kind of at this phase in their life should know about while they're still in school to prepare them for that next phase? Like what particular skill sets, what are firms looking for?
Yes, so I would say first and foremost, networking, participating in your local or your university organization, such as IIDA, getting every opportunity you can to network with those in the community that are in the profession. Also making sure that you're all chasing internships and taking full advantage of those within companies, and just really, I guess, making sure that you're also involved from a community aspect. At Gresham Smith, we always focus on improving the communities where we live and work. And so we really look for individuals to not only be passionate about their profession, but also be passionate about helping others in their communities and having those focus areas outside of the profession as well.
Yeah. So Mike, you hire in your position that you're in now. And so Tonya talked about some things, being deeply involved in community service, being passionate about the profession. What are some things that you look for when you're hiring, particularly now, right? It's times have changed, attitudes around work have changed. Everybody is looking for that employee that fits into the culture. What else matters when you're hiring?
Well, that's actually the biggest part is making sure that they can fit into the culture. Sometimes the portfolio could be absolutely amazing, but they might not be the right fit. And then you have to start all over. All the money and the time that you put into that, investing in that person, is just wasted. So that is the number one thing that I look for. But today I look for people who are excited about design, right? Mm-hmm. Excited to be in the office, excited to be a part of a community, but also has, some semblance of, great design or whatever path that they want to take within interior design. So a lot has to do with the portfolio. When we first before we even meet them, that's the first thing that we see. So it needs to be an extension of who you are. And I don't think that people realize that, right? So your portfolio and your resume should be one and the same as far as I'm concerned. It should never look like two different things that came from, something that was out of a typewriter versus like this really cool portfolio. So
you just totally aged and dated yourself when you said typewriter.
I know, right? That's going to be hard throughout the rest of this panel, but I think that is a really good start, and treat it like it's a project. Treat it like it's, a design, and that will start to set the attitude for the type of work that you want to do and the type of designer that you are. It's not just a page with images on there. It has to feel like a piece of work.
So that coherency between your portfolio and your resume, they complement one another. So those are two components. And so when the person comes in to interview with you, what's that like? What do you look for in the designer and the human being?
That's a tough question.
Tonya, feel free to jump in on that as well.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I was going to say, to your point, a lot of times you might play a small role in a project and it looks really cool, so you put that on your portfolio, but you should really be able to speak to that project from start to finish and understand it if you are going to have that on your portfolio. So when you come in for that interview, make sure you're knowledgeable about those projects that are included in your portfolio, and be able to speak to kind of the thought that went into the approach as well.
Yeah.
So I'll add eagerness. I'm looking for someone who's eager to learn, eager to teach, eager to look for something more, right? To take themselves to that next level. And, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a very outward focused person. It doesn't matter if you're introverted as well. Just the eagerness to learn and to be a part of the community, I think is a really, and it's hard to find, right?
Sofia, so when you were interviewing with Gensler, and what was that process like? And so in what Tonya and Mike were talking about with your resume, your portfolio, and yourself, how did you present yourself, and what did that feel like?
It was definitely nerve-wracking because, one, I'm looking for a job. Two, I'm looking for a job in the middle of a pandemic. Three, everything I've ever been taught about interviewing and presenting has been from the lens of people who have gotten a job in person. And I'm now interviewing from my college apartment on my laptop, only presenting my portfolio digitally, when I was told, like, everyone is going to bring an iPad, print out your portfolio, make it a book, and I don't have that option. So I really took kind of the opposite approach, not opposite, but you hear in design school a lot, like, refine your portfolio, have a really clean cut. And while I did spend a lot of time with my professors refining and editing, I had a super colorful portfolio. My resume was super, everything worked together, but there was no opportunity for the interviewers to really feel my personality unless I put it through what I was producing. So you hear the stereotype that architects wear all black or all white and it's super sleek. And I was super into graphic design, and I was like, I'm gonna, make this a magazine spread. And I remember professors telling me, less words are better on your portfolio, but I really care about storytelling. So my intro page for each project was my take on the project, and that resonated because I was able to edit and had a lot of input on how to make that streamlined, but I didn't want to work somewhere that didn't value what I did. So, and when I didn't really get to vet out the office in person or feel people's energy that were interviewing me, I wanted to submit things that I felt really were in line with what I was looking for. And if they don't like it, then it's probably not a place that I'm going to enjoy. And at that point, rejection was more not feeling like I didn't get something I was going for, but it was more affirming that the opportunity that was going to align with what I'm good at is still coming.
Yeah. You said a lot of things
Sorry.
that I want to pick up on. For our audience who's listening, one word that you used that I think is really important is storytelling. Design is storytelling in the built environment, and it's important for designers to be able to tell the story of themselves in an interview situation, and then ultimately with clients. Also, the piece where you talked about an interview isn't just one-sided. You aren't just being interviewed, you are also interviewing the firm. And Tonya, maybe can you elaborate on that it's important to ask great questions. It's important to get a feel for the place. Just because it's a job doesn't mean it's the right job for you.
Absolutely. You may have read about a company on a website and think it's a really great fit, but you have to make that determination. And so make sure that you are bringing your questions, and it's okay to ask questions with those you're interviewing. Ask tough questions. I always respect someone who comes in very well prepared and who asks me a question I have to think a little bit about before I respond. And just because they offer you an opportunity, it doesn't mean that you should take it. You should really make sure it's something you feel comfortable with, because ultimately, if it's not a right fit for you, it's not going to work out for either party in the long run. Like you said earlier, you have to make sure it's a right fit for the culture. So while that company's assessing you to make sure you fit into their culture, you need to make sure that's a culture you feel comfortable being a part of as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that the asking the questions is really important. The last thing, at the end of the conversation, we always ask them if they have any questions. And it's always kind of sad when no, I don't have any questions. So coming prepared I think is really important. Know who you're going to be interviewing with. Ask the questions beforehand. Do a little bit of research on the firm itself so that you are asking smart questions. Not as, I've had somebody ask, so what do you all do here? And that shouldn't be the question that we should be asking in the interview.
No.
Right? You should have done a little bit of research on the firm and try to understand their culture and see how that works best for you and your lifestyle and how you want to move forward in your career.
Yeah. And you also want the person that you're interviewing with to be an advocate for you. If you're kind of feeling that moment and it's feeling like you may fit, also knowing from a networking standpoint if that person you're interviewing with is an alum of TSU or wherever you're attending school, or if that person belongs to the same fraternity or sorority or belongs to IIDA, like establishing, if you have the information about the person that you're interviewing with, establishing those connections matter as well.
Yeah, early on in the process. So what about with this profession of design and architecture, entering the field, we know that there is a lack of diversity, ethnic and racial diversity, gender diversity, age diversity. We have some challenges in our profession, and I'd love to hear the three of you give some advice to young designers and young professionals about some of the challenges. As wonderful as a career in design is, there are some challenges that we face, like other professions. I'll open that up. Whoever wants to jump in first on that one. Sophia,
I can start on the age side.
Yeah, start on the age side.
I think it's a really great time to be young in design, because even though we're a few years into designing through a pandemic, it's everyone's first time designing in a pandemic. And as much knowledge as someone who has many more years of experience than you might have, they've never designed in a pandemic. And for me specifically, they'd never designed an office for people that don't want to go to an office. So it's really a great time to know that collaboration, like you're a true player in collaboration. You all went to school during a pandemic. You understand what online learning is like. You understand what an office or work environment from home feels like, and what you don't like about it or what you do like. And that is such a unique thing to bring to the table to people who have never gone to school online or have never experienced that the way that you did, is one part of it. And then the other part is you're the only graduating class of your year. Like, people at your company have been out of school for a long time, and design is a very cyclical industry, and you have knowledge that not everyone has. And so sharing that and being confident in what you like and what your interests are and what you bring to the table is valuable, even if you feel like you don't have the experience of people around you. As far as diversity in racial diversity, I think finding a company that is outward about their values is important. To me, finding a company that supported efforts for Latinos in architecture, women in design, not just, said they supported something, but are willing to sponsor and put money towards giving scholarships to young Latinos, actually sponsoring events that let you guide and let the committees themselves guide what change needs to happen, or what speakers need to be brought to schools, or things like that were really important to me. And that was a really good fit for me at Gensler, being very involved with all kinds of DEI initiatives and letting us really be the voice for what we want to see in the firm.
That's great. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, DEI is a big deal in interior design and in architecture. We have a long way to go before we kind of get on top of this. And I remember being the only person of color at the conference room table for almost 20 years. Mm-hmm. And it's only just now that I'm starting to see more and more other people come to the table. Not only that, we're starting to see more and more people ask for diverse architecture and interior design teams.
From the client side.
From the client side,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And, that makes you have to think hard and long about the type of staff that you have on board to be able to support those types of things. But then you also have to ask yourself or ask the client, but what does diversity mean to you? Right? Because diversity could be an all-female team. A diversity could be an all-black team. It all depends on who you're talking to at the moment. But a true diverse team is a team mixed of many backgrounds. And that's what you really want, because as time and time has shown us, the more diverse your team is, the more creative they are, the better they produce work, because you're getting thoughts and ideas from people from all over.
Right.
So it has been a real struggle, but one of the things that I personally do is reach back to the community. Reaching back to Howard University has been a huge thing for me. Raising scholarship money, I've raised over $20,000 in scholarships dedicated to Howard University students. But then even kind of more importantly, making sure that I represent the Black community. You have to really work hard to get to certain levels in your career, and I would love to say that I'm doing this all just for me because it's my personal goal, but I am doing this for the rest of the community as well. To show people that there is space for you at these different levels throughout my career, and to be able to show people a pathway to get there. So it's really important to me, but it's difficult. And there are so many people out there looking for ways, and there are so many different ways to go about it too.
Right.
So
it feels like it took our profession a bit longer to recognize maybe some disparities and some deficits in the profession. Tonya, it's beyond compliance, right? It's
Absolutely.
beyond checking a box, and we have X number of employees that look like this, or X number of employees that act like this. So when we start talking about equity and inclusion and belonging, talk a little bit about Gresham Smith and what you all as a firm are doing in your offices.
Yeah, so we have, of course, a lot of focus areas in the DEIB world, but what we've recognized, to Sofia's point of not really understanding what that looks like as far as growing up and reorganizing your room, and so helping get out in the elementary schools and get out there early so that we do have more diversity, because if there's no one to help you recognize that that's what area you want to go into, then we're still lacking as far as people going down that path. And so it is getting involved in the elementary schools, in the middle schools, helping them learn about STEM in general and design and what a career in that could look like, so they have a passion for it early on. But then also, once individuals get into an organization, being more intentional, because not to talk about statistics, because it's not about that, but if you do look at the statistics, we are making a lot of progress in the diversity in the population. But when you start looking at those that are progressing into leadership roles, both women and minorities, that's where it falls off. And so being very intentional about developing and providing opportunities for your diverse workforce, and having the tough conversations of what do we need to do to support you, having that flexibility if that's what's needed in work schedules, but making sure they don't fall behind in development opportunities.
Yeah, in interior design, 87% of interior designers are female or identify as female, yet only 20% of leaders in firms are women. And so, there's still a lot of work to be done looking at career path and life in a firm, the culture of a firm. there are other opportunities, certainly, for all of us in design. It's not just at a firm. There are product manufacturers, there are dealerships. So also looking at the places where your design degree can take you. It's an incredibly portable degree and useful degree, and the skill set of designers is so valued by so many other organizations. And so kind of having that, kind of looking at the depth and breadth of where your design degree can take you is important as well.
I was going to say that, obviously during the pandemic we had, Black Lives Matter and what happened with George Floyd. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of people ask me, well, how do I fix this? How do we fix this? And everyone's looking for a quick answer, a quick response, right? Yes, hiring more people who are diverse is a great idea. But all you're doing is taking that diversity from one firm, you're taking them and you're moving them over to another firm, and it's not something that's truly diverse.
Right. And that's when it's a numbers game, right?
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
when we were talking about its compliance, and you can hire as many people who look like you, look like Sofia, look like me, but if your firm, as Tonya was saying, isn't intentional and deliberate about having people belong and feel as if they are contributing to the firm, then it's a wasted exercise.
But it's a 10 or 15 year commitment.
It is.
To
Agreed.
us giving back to the community at a very young age, right? So, like you said, you didn't know what architecture was. Neither did I. I'd never met an architect before. Until I went to architecture school, right? So you don't know what you don't know, and reaching back to the community to show them that there is a path, whether if it's interior design, architecture, or just design in general, there is a path for you there, and look at all these people that are doing that, and there's a commitment to the community is what it really comes down to.
Yeah. Sophia?
And I think something to remember in all aspects of design, whether it be architecture all the way down to product design, we're in the business of placemaking, and that includes making space and place for people that don't look like you. And I think, again, that was just something really big for me as a student, was graduating right after George Floyd and having a lot of firms really look for a more diverse hiring group. And I think there's a difference between saying you're willing to hire a diverse group and feeling like firms really supported those groups and gave all kinds of people from different backgrounds, gave them the platform to speak, and kind of realized that as a company they needed to take a step back and make the place for them to grow. I don't want to work for a firm that doesn't believe in placemaking as a whole and just as buildings and spaces.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Tonya, something that you alluded to, exposure. And the earlier, the better. And I know your firm and a lot of firms like yours, you're rethinking your recruiting strategy, where you recruit from. But thinking about in elementary school and middle school and high school, you often aren't exposed to careers in design. One thing that we're doing at IIDA, we have our program Design Your World. It started in Chicago, we've expanded to Miami. We're going to be expanding to a third city, St. Louis, where we've created a after-school design curriculum for high school students. So introducing design at a very critical, some people are figuring out their career when they get to college, but certainly giving some career exposure while students are in high school. And typically in Black and brown communities, design isn't a career that you're either exposed to or encouraged to be a part of. Parents are encouraging you to go to dental school or medical school or law school, and you're not exactly being encouraged to go to design school. And so part of what we're doing with Design Your World is talking about the power of design, what it can do for you, what it can do for your community, but also helping kids understand how to explain a career in design to their parents. Because if you can't explain design to your mother, then you need to make sure you've got your elevator speech on what design is and what it means to you. Mike, I'm looking at you because How did you tell your mom that you wanted to be an architect?
This is weird because I know so many people that had issues with that, with
And you
just that.
didn't.
I didn't.
That's wonderful.
I really didn't. I was very lucky in that regard. My mom was supportive of what I wanted to do as long as I was in college.
Yeah.
Right. I had an ultimatum. It was either college or the military.
Or the military, yeah.
And I was able to figure that out, and my mom was hugely supportive of it. Now, was that what my grandfather really wanted for me at the beginning? No, he tried to get me into the medical field because there was good money, right? Because that's what we know.
And it's an understood career. When you say, I'm going to medical school, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a nurse, you automatically know what that is.
Right.
Design, there's a little bit of blurriness.
There is. And I think that one of the biggest things that I don't think that I appreciated or knew how much of an impact it would have on me as interior design in interior design is storytelling. Mm-hmm. I was big into comic books. That's all I did. I read these kind of fantastical comic books about these worlds that I had never seen before, and thought it was amazing that people could just create those things. And now I get to create these fantastical spaces for people and tell their story, which is interesting, because what people are realizing is that they do have a story to tell. It is diverse. It can be supportive and inclusive of everyone. And then how do we tell that works great for them? So I was really lucky in that regard. My mom was super supportive of it.
Good. Sounds like you had a lot of good support too.
Yeah, I was very lucky to have a lot of support behind me. I think where our industry changes very quickly based on both trend and looking back at things that have been done before, but a lot of the jobs that we'll have in the next 15, 20 years don't exist yet, which is something that's really cool about design. Set design has existed for years, but set design for podcasts or people that do animation graphics, they also need someone to design the space on a smaller scale. Or I think it's just really interesting. As much exposure as we could get young, I think it's also our job as kind of younger people in the profession, but being the ones to expose young people is you can design your career in design, and that's part of what it means to be a designer.
And the metaverse is changing everything.
Yeah, there's entire firms that are dedicated to metaverse design and AI design, and that didn't exist 2 years ago, and they're hiring tons of people. So it's crazy that you get a degree and you think like, this is what I'm going to do, and that changes yearly. So
I think the beauty of it and the luxury of it is that nothing has to be absolute. And even when you think about designing in a virtual world, and you talked about gaming, just because it's virtual doesn't mean that interior space is any less real, because it's real to the people who are inhabiting it.
Yeah, video games came in handy for me.
I bet, yeah.
Inkscape and Lumion, these are, rendering programs that we're using. It controls just like a video game. So as soon as I figured that out, I could fly around the space with no problem. And I enjoyed it that much more because it was something that I wanted to do as a young kid, was to design games. So it was a different level, but I had no idea that I would kind of be playing video games at work, right? It's interesting. It's definitely not, black and white. Yeah. It's very gray.
One thing I want to make sure that we touch on, the role that other people have had in your careers as mentors or through networking. If you can share a bit about having a mentor or being a mentor.
I would not be doing workplace without the mentors I had. I think several stand out to me, but a lot of the common thread was that every mentor I had is very niche in their career and very far along, and all of them started at Gensler. Okay. So for me, that was something that people I admired shared a common thread of where they started. And so when I at first had no idea what firm would be the right fit for me, I thought of learning from the people that I looked up to and where they had a foundation was something great that they taught me. And I think all of my mentors are also known for asking a lot of questions and being the thoughtful disruptor in their industry, their group. And so I think that took away a lot of fear for me of asking questions or being the person that doesn't know, or being the person that needs to say, I need to learn what you're asking me to do, was a huge thing that my role models taught me. They're extremely unafraid people. And I think that has been the best thing to learn from them.
So did you go after them very deliberately in a non-stalkery way? Like how did you find them and bring them to you? And is it informal? Is it formal? And again, I'm thinking some of this happened through the pandemic as well.
Sure.
And so you were being Zoom mentored? Like, how'd that work?
Kind of, yeah. So I think some came formally and some came informally.
Okay.
Definitely stalkery. I was the Instagram DMer that was design is personal, and what people share on their Instagram is, it's a visual representation of their personality, which as designers, that's important.
Mm-hmm.
So one example I'll give is Brian Graham was my thesis advisor. He's very involved with OFS, started at Gensler. And he came and did a talk for my school. I had no idea who he was previously. I was a freshman in college, found his Instagram, figured out I really liked what he did. And then it came time to do my thesis, and I was like, who's someone that I would want to guide me, and that I want to model, how I present my design self to the world. And I was like, one time I heard this guy speak, and it was pretty cool. And I cold emailed him and cold Instagram DM'd him. And lucky for me, Brian's very nice and was very willing to talk to me. But I think that was such an affirming moment that people you look up to are just people, and they are also designers and also love storytelling and also love teaching and learning. And they all had mentors, and it's kind of symbolic for them, for you to ask them to mentor you. Mm-hmm. So in that way, it was formal in that I had to pursue it, but informal in that, it was someone that I saw in passing that, you remember those people. Yeah. And it's okay to just be like, oh yeah, one time, you spoke on this and it really resonated with me, and pursue it that way.
So a little bit of courage.
Yes.
And a little bit of persistence.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Mike, what about you?
Can I just say, first of all, I'm impressed that you have
Right?
multiple mentors at such a young age, right? I mean, I have people who have been my mentor over the years, but I don't even think that I probably have as many as you have right now, which is kind of crazy. But I think we talked about this earlier. There are going to be multiple times where I feel old here, and I didn't have Instagram, we didn't have Facebook,
Right.
we didn't have LinkedIn, we didn't have those things. So you just glommed on to whomever you could find at the time. There wasn't a, podcast or a panel that I could go to. That wasn't something that was done when I was
It was much
younger.
more immediate. Like your pre kind of social media, for a lot of us, our mentors were in the same place geographically
Exactly.
that we were. But now, via social media, your mentors can be anywhere.
I think it was even more kind of focused in too, right? Where if I did look for a mentor for a specific class that I was in, I would look for one of my favorite professors at Howard, and then I would go to them on off hours.
Yeah.
And they appreciated that courage and that enthusiasm to be able to ask their opinion after, outside of the class. So it's that. And I've had some really great mentors, and I think it's really, really important to have those mentors, because not only are they helping you learn and be a better designer, but to kind of navigate those things that you might not necessarily know about. I came from a blue-collar family. To understand how to navigate the white-collar world is different. I can't rely on my family for those types of things. I have to be able to reach out to other people who know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And also for them to be advocates for you when they are having those important conversations about how you progress, and so that they can be your voice. So it's really important to have those people as your advocates, but kind of to help guide me through some of those things that I might not necessarily have known about or could rely on family for.
And Tonya, from a firm standpoint, I know you can't speak for all the design firms in the world, but it feels like firms are encouraging more formal aspects of mentoring in the workplace. I mean, certainly we can informally find mentors, but mentoring is something that is supported by your firm and a lot of other design firms as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things we're working on now in our 2025 plan is revamping our mentorship program. But I would say, while, a lot of people try to develop these formal mentoring programs, which is great, that should only be one aspect. You get different things from different mentors. And so I would always encourage everyone to have multiple mentors at once. You may have one mentor that really helps you along that technical path and developing within your design skills, and another one who's showing you the path to leading and collaborating and teamwork. So I would also say, even if you have a mentor in the company that you end up joining, always have a mentor outside of that organization, because sometimes you may need to vent or just bounce things off of them that you need direction where they're not so closely tied or loyal to that organization, and that advice externally is very helpful.
And regardless of age, right, mentoring is just not a one-way street, and just because you're a certain age doesn't automatically qualify you to be a mentor. You can mentor in multiple directions, right? Laterally, vertically, all the directionals.
And I find I've mentored someone, and I feel like I learned just as much from them,
absolutely,
if not more, than they were learning from me. So it goes both ways as well, and age is not a factor.
Right.
I think
Sofia?
that's a great interview question that we were talking about earlier, is asking what mentorship looks like at the firms you're looking for. Having been lucky to have 2 mentors in college, that was a huge priority for me. And I have my company supports a professional development coach, and I'm lucky to be very close with mine and learn a whole lot on a daily basis. But I think knowing what you're looking for in a mentor is also great. Like, if you know your strengths, looking for a mentor that both complements those and might help you in areas that you want to grow is a great way to look for a mentor when you can actually articulate what you want to learn.
So my last question before we have some audience Q&A, for the 3 of you, what are you optimistic about right now? And if you've got any words of advice? Who wants to go first on that one? All right.
So I'm very optimistic about design in general and just the industry, just because we've dealing with inflation, dealing with the risk of economic challenges, and I feel like our industry is still thriving. While, yes, in certain types of areas there are slower periods, but it's finally been recognized, the need for designers and so our industry, the innovation too, talking about AI. So those are the things I'm optimistic about, is just the industry as a whole and where it's going. Advice, I would say take risk and make mistakes. By making mistakes, that's where I have learned the best lessons of my career. And it was by taking those risks. And so that would be my advice.
That's great. Mike?
I'm excited about how this next level of DEI and culture comes into play. I mean, we're talking about, living in a world post-pandemic, and that is really kind of pushing companies to have a better understanding of who they are as a culture. And then when you start to overlay diversity, equity, and inclusion and that story, now you're getting great stories to tell and some new and invigorating ways to design space. And as you know, I'm all about telling a really great story. to be able to see what comes of that is something that I'm really excited for.
Yeah. Culture forward, I think, is going to be so important for our industry. Sophia.
I think to echo that, I guess a combination of those two things. For the first time, the average person is aware of the impact interiors has. They've either hated working from home or loved it. They're more receptive to the fact that it's a real industry and that you have an impact on people in what you do. So in that same vein, storytelling on your end is more valued. People, you can choose how you involve your clients in your storytelling. You can choose how you teach them to participate in the storytelling of their own spaces. And I think that it's a really great time to be a young designer who can say, I was in school learning about placemaking from home, and now I know what it means to translate that into something new. So I just think that our industry is taken a lot more seriously, and we're in the perfect place to grow at a time that everyone is excited about design.
That's great. Any advice?
Ask a lot of questions. And I think knowing that everyone above you has been in your position of not knowing something, and not being afraid to say, I don't know, is great, because I think a lot of times you tell someone, I don't know what it is you're asking me to even do at the moment. And then sometimes you'll have people above you that say, I actually don't know what I need you to do either. And it's like a minute of like, let's sit and focus and learn with intent,
and that happens together.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's like you're collaborating with someone who's teaching you, and you're both learning about your communication or about what you're trying to produce. Yeah. And that would never happen if you don't say you don't know.
That's perfect.
Can I add to that?
Sure. Add to that.
I forgot to give my, but I think that engagement is really important, and it's a part to do with what you were just talking about, asking questions, being engaged. We're a very tactile industry, right? You can only do so much digitally before you need to kind of touch and feel the things to be able to understand the effect that it might have on someone emotionally when you're creating these stories. So being engaged and just knowing that asking even what you might think is a dumb question isn't necessarily dumb. So as long as you just don't keep asking the same question over and over again, right? But sometimes it's hard to remember that they might not know that as a senior person, right? And you have to, take a step back and say, oh yes, okay, here's a time where I need to slow down and I need to be engaged with you so that you will learn something that will progress your career. So engagement is huge.
Yeah.